The smell of roasted turkey filled the dining room when my brother stood up and raised his glass. Conversation stopped instantly. 20 relatives sat around the long oak table, watching him with polite smiles. Before we eat, he said loudly, "I want to thank Mom and Dad for trusting me with the company." My stomach tightened. Then he added, casually, "Arlette won't be involved anymore." Forks froze in midair. My parents stared at their plates like they had practiced this moment. No one said a word. I felt every eye turn toward me. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I simply lifted my glass and took a slow sip of wine. I kept my face still because surprise would have helped him. My brother had always liked an audience. He liked announcements, applause, visible reactions. If I had cried, or shouted, or pushed my chair back too fast, the room would have moved toward him immediately. Comfort follows confidence in families like mine. Truth comes later, if it comes at all. So I took a sip of wine and let him keep talking. He thanked my parents for seeing the bigger picture. He said the company needed steadier leadership. He said the transition had been in motion for months. Every sentence was polished. My mother folded her napkin in her lap without looking at me. My father kept his eyes on the turkey like carving it required full concentration. That part hurt more than my brother's speech. He was being himself. They were choosing silence. The company had started 6 years earlier at a borrowed desk in a drafty studio over a hardware store. I built it at 23 with one client and a credit card balance I tracked in a notebook because I couldn't afford accounting software yet. I answered calls, sent invoices, drafted proposals, and cleaned the office bathroom because there was no one else to do it. For the first 18 months, the only paycheck I trusted was the one I created myself. My parents had called it a phase at first. Then, when contracts started coming in, they called it promising. Then, when the company became stable enough to attract attention, they started calling it ours. That shift had happened quietly. Advice became opinions. Opinions became meetings. Meetings became pressure. My brother, who had never lasted more than a year in any job, began appearing in conversations as someone with vision. My mother said he understood people. My father said he had presence. I noticed neither of them ever mentioned numbers. At the table that night, my aunt glanced at me, then down at her plate. My cousin pretended to adjust the candles. My uncle coughed into his fist and said nothing. These were people who knew I had built the business. They had seen me miss birthdays, leave dinners early, answer client calls in parking lots. But public betrayal makes witnesses small. Most people choose quiet over accuracy when the food is already on the table. My brother set his glass down and smiled at me. "Nothing personal," he said. That almost made me laugh. Everything about it was personal. The timing. The room. The fact that they had chosen Thanksgiving, when leaving would look dramatic and staying would look weak. It was designed to pin me in place. I set my wineglass down carefully and asked the only question that mattered. "Should I tell them now?" I said, looking at my father, "or do you want to?" The sound in the room changed. Not louder. Thinner. My father looked up for the first time all evening. His face had that flat, caught expression people get when a private plan reaches public air too soon. My brother's smile held for another second, then slipped at the edges. My mother spoke first. "Arlette," she said softly, the way she used to speak when correcting me in front of other people, "this is neither the time nor the place." I nodded once. "That was true before he stood up," I said. "Not after." No one moved. I reached beside my chair, picked up the leather folder I had placed there when I arrived, and laid it on the table. My brother stared at it. My father looked away. My mother's hand tightened around her fork. I had brought the folder because I had learned something important 3 weeks earlier. Betrayal is almost never sudden. Usually, it arrives in drafts. I had found the first draft by accident when our operations manager forwarded me a board agenda meant for internal review. My name was missing. My brother's wasn't. He had been listed as interim chief executive pending ownership transition. Ownership transition. 2 words. No supporting documents attached. No legal basis. Just assumption dressed as paperwork. I didn't confront anyone then. I went home, pulled every founding document I had ever signed, every equity agreement, every amendment, every email where my parents insisted I keep controls temporary and informal because family didn't need rigid language. I had smiled at the time and added clauses anyway. Quiet ones. Boring ones. The kind people skip when they assume affection outranks paper. At Thanksgiving, I opened the folder and slid one document toward my father. Incorporation papers, I said. Original filing. Then another. Founder equity agreement. Then another. Voting control clause. My brother stopped smiling completely. My father stared at the papers like they had appeared from nowhere. The dining room stayed silent except for the quiet crackle of candles on the table. My brother shifted in his chair and looked at my parents, waiting for one of them to take control again. They didn't. That was when something became clear to everyone in the room. This plan had depended on my silence. My father flipped one page slowly. His hands looked older than they had 10 minutes earlier. My brother leaned forward. "Those don't change anything," he said quickly. But the speed of his voice gave him away. They changed everything. The first document listed me as founder and sole owner. The second outlined equity structure. The third confirmed that control of the company could not be transferred without my written approval. My brother wasn't listed anywhere. Not in the founding documents. Not in voting rights. Not in equity ownership. Nowhere. He looked at my parents again. "You told me this was handled," he said. My mother finally spoke. "We were going to discuss it properly," she said. That sentence floated in the room like smoke. Discuss it properly. Meaning they planned to pressure me later. Meaning Thanksgiving was only step 1. Meaning tonight was supposed to make it socially impossible for me to say no. My brother pushed his chair back slightly. "This company needs real leadership," he said. "Everyone knows that." My uncle finally spoke from the far side of the table. "Arlette built it," he said calmly. My brother ignored him. "You've been running things emotionally," he continued, looking at me now. "Mom and Dad agreed we needed someone more stable." I watched him carefully. He believed it. That was the strange part. My brother had always lived inside stories where he was the natural center. When something good appeared in the family orbit, he assumed it would rotate toward him eventually. The company had been the largest thing in that orbit. My father cleared his throat. "We were only trying to secure the future," he said quietly. The words felt familiar. Because this wasn't the first time. When I was 16, my college savings account had quietly helped my brother pay off credit card debt. When I was 22, the apartment I had been saving for became a family investment opportunity for my brother's failed restaurant idea. When I was 25, my promotion bonus disappeared into a temporary loan that was never repaid. Each time, the language was the same. Family. Support. Future. Each time, I was told I understood responsibility better than my brother did. Which meant I should sacrifice more. Tonight was simply the largest version of the same pattern. My brother leaned forward again. "You're making this dramatic," he said. "Mom and Dad already approved the transition." I slid one final document across the table. Board authorization requirements. Signed 6 years earlier. The clause required founder approval for leadership transfer. My signature. Only mine. My cousin exhaled loudly. "So none of this is legal?" she asked. My father didn't answer. That was answer enough. My brother's face turned red. "You set this up," he said. "No," I replied calmly. "I prepared." The difference matters. I had spent years learning something my family never expected. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's observation. I had watched how decisions were made. I had listened to the small assumptions people spoke when they believed I would always accept them. Tonight, the assumption was that I would fold in front of the family. That I would avoid conflict. That I would protect their comfort. Instead, I simply opened the folder further. Inside were printed emails. Board discussions. A message from my father 3 weeks earlier suggesting my brother should begin acting as company leader before paperwork was finalized. My aunt leaned closer. "This looks like fraud," she said quietly. My mother stiffened. "That's an unfair word," she said. But no one rushed to defend her. My brother pushed back from the table fully now. "You can't humiliate us like this," he said. The sentence surprised me. Because humiliation had been the point of his speech. But humiliation only works if the story holds. And the story was already breaking apart. I took another sip of wine. Calm again. Careful again. Then I asked the same question I had asked before. "Should I tell them the rest," I said gently, "or would you prefer to?" My father's shoulders dropped. That was when I knew the truth had finally caught up to them. My father didn't answer immediately. The room waited. The turkey on the table had started to cool, but no one reached for it. My brother's chair scraped slightly against the floor as he shifted again, restless now. The confidence he had walked in with was gone. "What rest?" he demanded. I looked at my father again. This was the moment he had been avoiding for weeks. When I discovered the board agenda with my brother's name on it, I didn't panic. I didn't confront anyone. I called a lawyer instead. Not because I expected a fight. Because I expected pressure. Pressure is quieter than conflict, but it lasts longer. My lawyer had listened to everything, read the documents, and then asked a simple question. "Do they know about the founder clause?" I told him they probably didn't remember it. He had smiled slightly. "Then let them proceed," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Because the more steps they take without authority," he replied, "the clearer the record becomes." That was when I realized something. Their entire plan depended on my cooperation. They needed me to accept the narrative publicly. If I protested quietly later, the family would already believe the story. But if I let them go too far, the truth would arrive all at once. Thanksgiving gave them the stage they wanted. But it also gave me witnesses. I opened the folder again and removed a final sheet. Not a founding document. A legal notice. My brother leaned forward again, trying to see it. "What is that?" he said. "A timeline," I replied. 3 weeks earlier, when I discovered the board agenda, my lawyer had filed something quietly. A corporate protection notice. It froze any ownership transfer attempt until a legal review was completed. My brother blinked. "You froze the company?" "No," I said calmly. "I froze unauthorized changes." My mother's face went pale. "You did this behind our backs?" she asked. I met her eyes. "Yes." The room felt colder now. My uncle leaned forward. "So even if they tried to transfer it," he said slowly, "they couldn't?" "Correct," I replied. My brother laughed sharply. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're acting like we're criminals." No one responded to that. Because the documents on the table already told the story. Unauthorized leadership appointment. Ownership transfer discussion. Legal authority missing. If any of those steps had continued inside the company, the board could have triggered an investigation. Which meant something my parents had not considered. Reputation. Companies survive on trust. And scandals destroy trust faster than numbers ever can. My father rubbed his forehead. "You didn't have to escalate this," he said quietly. I almost smiled. Because escalation had started long before tonight. It started when they decided to replace the founder without telling her. My brother stood up now. You're overreacting, he said loudly. No, I replied. I'm finishing something. Then I said the one sentence they hadn't expected. The board meeting next Monday has already been notified. My father froze. What? He said. They received the documents yesterday, I explained. Not the whole folder. Just enough. Enough to show the attempted transition had no legal basis. Enough to force the board to pause every change. Enough to ensure the truth entered official records. My cousin looked between us. So the company is still yours, she asked. Yes. And the board knows your brother tried to take it? Yes. My brother slammed his hand on the table. I didn't try to take anything, he snapped. Mom and Dad gave it to me. That sentence landed harder than anything else that night. Because it revealed the real story. My parents hadn't simply supported the idea. They had promised him something they didn't own. My father finally spoke again. We thought you'd understand, he said. That sentence was the oldest pattern in our family. Understanding meant surrender. Understanding meant silence. Understanding meant letting someone else take the larger piece. But something had changed in me weeks earlier when I read that agenda. I realized something simple. If I kept accepting the pattern, it would never stop. So I closed the folder slowly. Understanding isn't the same as agreeing, I said. The room stayed silent again. But this time, the silence felt different. Because the story had already shifted. And there was only one part left. No one spoke for several seconds after I said that. The room had changed in a quiet but permanent way. Earlier that night, my brother had controlled the story. My parents had controlled the atmosphere. Everyone else had simply watched. Now the room belonged to the truth sitting in front of them. My father slowly closed the folder. His shoulders sagged, not dramatically, just enough to show the weight had finally landed. The company is legally hers, he said. He didn't look at anyone while saying it. The words settled across the table. My brother blinked in disbelief. You told me it was handled, he said. My mother opened her mouth to answer but stopped. Whatever explanation she had prepared clearly sounded different now that the documents were visible. My uncle leaned back in his chair. So this whole announcement, he said, was based on nothing? My father didn't argue. He nodded once. My brother's face flushed red again. This is ridiculous, he said, standing halfway from his chair. You're all acting like I tried to steal something. No one answered him. Because that was exactly what the papers suggested. I didn't add anything to the conversation. I didn't need to. The documents had already done the talking. That was something I had learned slowly while building the company. Emotion convinces people in the moment. Evidence convinces them afterward. And evidence lasts longer. My mother finally spoke again. We were trying to keep peace in the family, she said. The sentence sounded small now. Peace had been their favorite word for years. Peace meant avoiding conflict. Peace meant shifting problems quietly onto the person least likely to protest. For most of my life, that person had been me. I stood up slowly. The chair legs scraped lightly against the wood floor. Every face at the table turned toward me again, but this time it wasn't with curiosity or judgment. It was with recognition. The story they had watched unfold no longer matched the one they were told. I didn't come tonight to fight, I said calmly. No one interrupted. I came because I hoped you'd tell the truth before I had to. My father looked at the table again. My brother looked at the documents. My mother looked everywhere except at me. None of them had expected the evening to end like this. My uncle broke the silence. So what happens now, he asked. The answer was simple. The lawyers finish what already started, I said. No threats. No dramatic promises. Just process. Corporate records would be corrected. Unauthorized decisions would be reversed. The board would document what happened. After that, the company would move forward the way it always had, with the person who built it running it. My brother sat down slowly again. The fight had drained out of him. Without the story he walked in with, there wasn't much left to argue. My father finally looked up. "I didn't think you'd go this far," he said quietly. I understood what he meant. For years, I hadn't. But something about discovering that agenda 3 weeks earlier had changed the calculation in my head. I realized I wasn't protecting family anymore. I was protecting a pattern. And patterns only stop when someone refuses to repeat them. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. "I'll have the attorneys send the next steps," I said. No one tried to stop me. That surprised me less than it should have. Because once the truth is spoken clearly, people usually understand where the boundary is. I walked toward the door while the rest of the family remained seated around the long oak table. The candles still burned. The turkey still sat untouched. But the story that had started that evening had already ended. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. I buttoned my coat and stood on the porch for a moment before walking to my car. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A message from the company's operations director. The board had already acknowledged the legal notice. Everything was paused until review. I typed one short reply. Understood. Then I put the phone away and started the car. The road ahead was quiet. For the first time in a long while, it felt that way inside my head too.